Hey, it's Mr. Pouts. And we're starting our chapter 3, which is all about inequalities. So we talked about equations in last chapter. This builds right off of it. Inequalities, you might remember learning about the alligators opening up to the bigger number. That's kind of the basis of what we're learning in this chapter. We're going to take it a little bit farther than what you've done in the past. So our learning target for section 1 is to write, graph, and identify solutions to inequalities. Okay, we're going to especially focus on those first two. So some success criteria for today. Got to know keywords that represent inequalities. So we've talked about keywords for other things. We're going to talk about keywords for inequalities. Um, got to know when to use an open circle versus a closed circle for graphing. And then also for the last part is plugging in. So we're going to do some plugging in once again. So let's get into it. Let's talk about, well, here's a little intro to you. Just to think about. When you're given a speed limit sign of 40, what does that mean? Does that mean you have to go exactly 40? Does that mean you can go over 40? Does that mean you can go less than 40? Does that mean you should go over or less than? What does that mean? That's actually a real-world example of an inequality. So obviously a speed limit means you can go 40 or less. You're supposed to go 40 or less, which would mean our speed limit, which is x, would be less than or equal to 40. We're going to get into that a little more. Here's another example. You must be 18 or older to ride in the last car. Sometimes there's a height restriction. Okay, different things with real-world examples there. So a couple vocabulary words. Let's just talk about this first. An inequality. Make sure you have these written down. An inequality is a mathematical sentence that uses an inequality symbol. So that's like a greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to compare the values of two expressions. And the second one is a solution to an inequality. The solution to an inequality is any number that would make the inequality true. So any number that you can plug in that makes it work. Now, both of these vocabulary terms are in your vocabulary for this chapter, so I would highly encourage you to write them down. Now, we've got different inequality symbols. So we've got, we'll go right here.
Amelia, if you're in the building, could you come down to the office? Thanks.
And I recognize all these. These are all inequality symbols. So the way they open does matter. I know you always open to the bigger number, but the way this one is written, this first one, this is less than. Because no matter how you write it, if you write, you have to have the bigger number, so 0, and we could have 4, anything bigger. You'd say 0 is less than 4. So when you open it up that way, where the bigger number is on the right, the symbol that opens to the right is always the less than symbol. So the opposite would be if you did it this way, 4 has to be bigger than 0, so 4 is greater than 0. That's the greater than symbol. Make sure these are written down. These are a big part. Put a box around this. This is like the start to this whole unit here. Now, by the way, if you want to decide between greater than or less than, the less than symbol, if you look right here, kind of looks like an L. L for less than. That's one way, a very common way to remember it. All right. So then when you have that line underneath it, maybe you remember, that means it could be or equal to. So this would be still less than, because it looks like the less than symbol. Less than or equal to. Meaning you could put something in there that would be, on the left side would be less than or equal to the one on the right side, then it would work. This one would be a greater than or equal to. Now, with that, our first part of this section really is talking about writing inequalities. And now, we've talked about different keywords for adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and equals. Like, some common ones, like, and you don't have to write this down, this is just a review, like plus, obviously, or more than, or increase. Some common ones that we did for multiplication, like were per or each. Again, subtraction, division, we had different terms. What I want to focus on today is more finding different terms, not for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, but for greater than, less than, and I'm going to use the symbols. Well, so that would be greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Now, I'm going to actually go back to what we just had on the slide before, and I'm just going to use that because we have them all written here. So you can just write them off to the side. There are some very common key words that are represented for each of them in the real world. We're going to talk about a couple of them, and you'll see more and more as we go. Let's talk about less than. So something that's going to be less than. Obviously, less than is a keyword. Well, let's think of some popular ones. So you say at least. Where does at least go? At least means it could be that or bigger. So it'd be greater than or equal to. So that would be right here. Okay, what about no more than? No more than means it can't be more than it, but it could be equal to it, so it'd be less than or equal to. How about over? It's got to be over than 15 feet tall. That'd be greater than. How about less or lower? That would be less than. Now you can think of some other key ones. I want you to try to think of some. We're going to discuss this next time in class. What other ones, what other phrases represent inequalities? Okay, that's what I want you to think about. But let's go through a couple examples that you could add here. Let's just do, we'll do this one, we'll do this one, we'll do this one for right now. So it says P is greater than or equal to 5. Well, that one hopefully you can figure out. We're taking our P, we're using a greater than or equal to symbol, and 5. We'll add one more here. 2 times D is less than 10. Well, let's write it out exactly how it says. 2 times D would be 2D, less than 10. Now, these other two, it gets into a little bit more real-world examples. You must be over 42 inches tall to ride the roller coaster. So to write that as an inequality, we can use X. But if you need to be over 42, that means you have to be greater than 42 inches tall. So it'd be X is greater than 42. All right, one more. Children under 3 are admitted for free. So we'll say the children are X. But to be under 3, it means you could be 2, you could be 1. So it would have to be anything less than 3. So that's kind of the basics of writing inequalities. Let's talk about the second main thing for this this section. That's graphing inequalities. So to graph an inequality, you may recall. Well, let's actually look at some examples right here. If you wanted to graph an inequality like this first example, how do we graph it? Like, we know there's a number there, we should find that number. But there's these things with the open circles, there's the closed circles, there's arrows going this way, there's arrows going this way. So which ones, how do we know what to use and when? So that's what I'm going to show you right here. So maybe you remember from last year, maybe you don't. Always rewrite the variable so the variable comes first. So I would suggest writing this. This is our part 2 graphing. I would suggest writing this down here. Rewrite so the variable comes first. If it comes last, flip everything around, including the symbol. So I'll show you an example of that in a second. Second, locate the number on the number line. So always find that number and place a dot there. Now it's an open dot if it's just less than or if it's greater than. That means it does not include that number. But it's a closed dot, so an open dot like this. It's a closed dot like this when it includes it. So you fill in that gap, fill in that hole when it also could include that number, when it could be equal to it. And then finally, draw the arrow, extend the graph to the right or the left. Greater than if it's going to the right, less than if it's going to the left, using an arrow. Now, if you have it written the right way, the arrow actually will point in the direction you want it to go, like the inequality symbol. But you also can just think about what numbers would work. and put them in that direction. So here's our first example. Right now, if we look at step 1, we want to rewrite it so the variable's in front. In this case, it's not in front. So we want to change it so that A is in front and the 2 is in back. So we flipped it around. We also have to flip the symbol around so that's still opening up to that 2. So it's A is less than or equal to 2. All right, step 2, locate the number. On the number line, I've got a 2. It is in a closed circle because it is or equal to. So right there we have or equal to, so it's a closed circle at 2. And we have it written as, sorry, I'm going to highlight this one because this is what it is. A is less than or equal to 2. So A is less than or equal to 2 goes towards the things that are less than. All right, I've got 3 graphs here for each of these 3. I'd like you to, you can pause it here and try these. I'm going to go through each of them, but if you feel comfortable, pause it, try them, and then check. All right, for A, right here, I start at -4 because it's in the right order, so step 1 is already done. Start at the number -4, and it's an open circle because it's not, it's just a less or a greater than symbol. It's not or equal to. So it's open circle, and it's greater than, so it's going to the things to the right, the things that are greater than -4. For B, I started at the same thing. It's already in the correct order, so I start at 0, open circle, because there's a less than symbol. And then I drew the arrow to the left, because it's everything less than 0 that would work. And then C, I had to flip it around, because we don't have the variable in front. So I put n in front. N is greater than or equal to 3, so I flipped everything. So I can put a closed circle here, closed circle at 3, and then going to the right where things are greater than. So that is graphing. That is graphing inequalities. All right. We're gonna end it at that for right now. I want you to think about one question as we leave off. Why do you think a filled circle is used for greater than or equal to and less than or equal to, as opposed to the open circle, which is used otherwise? What do you think could be the reason behind using a filled circle versus an open circle to show the difference between the two? That's my closing question for you, and I want you to think about that as you think about our goals for today. We really just focused on these first 2, so we focused on the writing and the graphing. And again, our success criteria, knowing those key words, we're going to talk about those a little bit more as we go. And also, the second one that's really important is knowing when to use open circle versus closed circle for graphing. So we focused on those 2 success criteria today. All right, have a great rest of your day. Talk to you later.